Postcards from Beyond, written and narrated by Paul Harris. A 21st century Buddha. During the 17th and 18th centuries, there was a dramatic flowering of human thought that became known as the Age of Reason. The driving force behind this philosophical revolution was the desire for human affairs to be guided by rationality rather than by faith, superstition, or revelation. Gradually, the conviction grew that human reason alone had the power to change society and could liberate the individual from the shackles of custom, blind belief, and arbitrary authority. This principle was backed up by a worldview increasingly authenticated by science rather than by religion. This credo, so influential in advancing civilization and broadening our horizons for over 300 years, is still very much at the heart of our 21st century world. Society appears to be increasingly secular these days, with religious views and traditional spiritual values seemingly on the back foot, at least for the time being. Our culture greatly values scientific rigour, objective proof, logical thought, and rational argument, and considers blind belief, superstition, and unquestioning subjugation to the authority of others as outdated and dangerous. People increasingly are not accepting things as being true just because someone in a powerful position tells them it is so. The modern outlook demands, not unjustifiably, evidence of the existence of something before trust is placed in it. Skepticism and doubt are fashionable, and there is a burden placed upon all spiritual traditions to substantiate the beliefs they uphold. The Buddha lived in India 500 years before the Romans conquered Britain, a very different age. Could such an ancient teaching have any relevance in today's world, with such firebrand skepticism so firmly rooted in our culture? Reading the Buddha's discourses in the Pali Canon, we discover that Gautama held a moderate and progressive attitude regarding questions of belief and free inquiry. Spiritual discourse had always been an indelible part of the Indian culture, and wandering mendicant monks would always find an audience in the villages and towns that was eager to listen to what they had to say. Once, on one of his regular walking tours, Gautama stopped off at the village of Kesaputta. The people of Kesaputta, the Kalamas, found that the various teachers who visited all had widely differing views and would expound their own ideas as being the truth, and would disparage and condemn the views of others. In the end, the Kalamas became confused and doubtful, not knowing whom to believe. The advice the Buddha gave the villagers has since become famous as a compelling argument against the diktats of dogmatism and blind belief, in preference for direct personal investigation. He counselled them against accepting an idea as being true simply on the basis that it was a traditionally held belief, or because other people's testimonies sounded plausible. Neither should they be taken in by the mere skill of the orator. Just because a particular declaration seemed reasonable, logical, or happened to meet with their approval, did not mean that it was right. Nor should they accept an assertion simply out of respect for the person who held it, no matter how revered he or she may be. Care must be taken with this message. The Buddha was not dismissing all doctrine, faith, or spiritual guidance out of hand. He was not inviting the Kalamas to accept or reject whatever they like according to their whim. Gautama told them that the only acceptable criteria to judge a particular spiritual way must come from putting its principles into practice and finding out directly for themselves. It is direct personal experience alone that will properly inform us as to whether something is right or wrong, true or false, and whether it reduces and eliminates suffering or not. Mindful investigation of life and the ability to wisely reflect on our experience are integral characteristics of the Buddha's teaching. And he insisted that everything he taught was personally discoverable through one's own efforts. To undertake such an investigation without knowing what the result will be requires faith. Faith is a positive human quality. To have faith is to have confidence, which is not at all the same thing as blind belief. Without faith, we would never accomplish anything. You wouldn't expect a scientist standing before his equipment to say, "I will not perform this experiment until I have a guarantee that it will have a successful outcome." The scientist performs his experiment with uncertainty as to the outcome, but with the confidence that whatever the result, he will be more knowledgeable as a consequence. By the same token, adopting a set of religious beliefs with no way of verifying their authenticity for oneself is a total abdication of personal responsibility. You have to be willing to place your beliefs at risk through undertaking a proper examination of life. In just the same way as with the scientist, you begin from a position of uncertainty as to the outcome, but with the confidence that you will be wiser for it, even if what you find disproves the beliefs that you had previously held. To explain another way, consider the skeptic's notion that you often come across. "I'll believe it when I've seen it." This idea is a complete nonsense, isn't it? If you have seen it, then you no longer need to believe it. All beliefs are attempts to escape from the uncertainty of not knowing. You believe precisely because you do not know. Once you have understood, belief becomes entirely superfluous. To understand, however, you must be free to investigate, and to investigate freely, you must first be willing to accept that you do not know. Not knowing is to remain in and investigate from a position of uncertainty, and that requires faith. Faith and investigation are partners, not enemies. They are both positive and necessary functions of the human psyche, and having the two working in harmony is essential to a person's well-being and enjoyable participation in life. Religion and science are united in the sense that they are both expressions of the same fundamental human desire to find the truth that sets us free. The Buddha's core teaching is that complete freedom from suffering is potentially available to anyone, and he provides us with the tools with which to investigate life and discover that freedom for ourselves. To do this, however, we must begin from a position of uncertainty and openness, with our current view structures, whether secular or religious, held lightly in our hands. It is also imperative to use the tools wisely, and this requires us to place our faith in the guidance of a teacher and to undertake spiritual practices as instructed. Only then is it possible to properly ascertain the effectiveness of what the Buddha taught. Gautama advised his students to test the training by entering into it under the guidance of a capable teacher. He said that if, after practicing properly for an appropriate length of time, they found that suffering did not diminish and wisdom did not grow, then they were to leave that teacher and go off and find another, even if he was the most highly revered teacher in the world. If, however, they found that their suffering did diminish and wisdom did grow, then they were never to leave that teacher's side, even if he drove them off with a stick. From the evidence of his message to the Kalamas, we can see that the Buddha's teaching is perfectly in harmony with our pragmatic 21st century outlook, and actually goes much further than the ideas and values introduced during the Age of Reason. Buddha Dhamma is flexible, reasonable, rational and intelligent. It encourages an open-minded attitude along with a spirit of inquiry, balanced with an equal amount of faith and the overarching desire to find out the truth for oneself.